Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cold Feet Podcast. So, I met this guy on Instagram, who I believe his name is Greg, as the volleyball strength coach. And there's no more obvious niche and purpose in what you do because your Instagram handle is literally, I train volleyball players to get strong and athletic. So, Greg, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Greg Hersig. I am the volleyball strength coach on Instagram. I've been a personal trainer, strength conditioning coach, CrossFit coach, all kinds of stuff for about 10 years now. I have my degree in exercise science and I have a master's degree in sports performance, both from Ball State University. Currently, I am working full time at a gym at a Lifetime, but I have an entire separate business where I train volleyball players through Instagram and online and things like that. So I've also been playing volleyball since I was 13 years old, played Division I at Ball State, and now I primarily play beach volleyball, but I also play on a team in the VLA, the Volleyball League of America in the US, which is like an adult league, professional league that we have over here. And yeah, so it's been going really well so far. Only been doing this about 2 years formally with the page, and it's grown well, and I'm able to help and positively influence a lot of people.
Wow, so thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm happy to meet you in person. I know we've never really interacted other than the virtual world, so it's a pleasure to have you here. Something you said about, just to understand, you're still an active athlete. Like you're playing for America as a coach and a player.
Yes, so I still play quite frequently. I just had practice this morning for beach. I have practice tonight for indoor. Got a tournament this weekend for indoor, so still playing very frequently.
That's huge. I mean, we all have this stigma of some like older man just sitting on the bench and yelling at us to do laps or just do our workout. And the fact that you're still an active athlete, not just playing casual, playing competitively and coaching people, you're leading by example. I'm sure when you tell your athlete to squat 100 kilo or do a sprint, you're like, bro, I can do this too. Like, I think it's so important as coaches of athletes, especially in the professional world, that we stay in shape, lead by example, and really, really practice what we preach.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's way easier to get people to buy into what you're doing when you're actually doing it yourself. And it kind of, because I'm forced to make so much content just as my job, it makes it much easier to do that too.
Mm. Same for me. I mean, every time I build myself programming, I'm like, I can use these exercises for my athletes. Next thing you know, my workouts are taking 3 hours because I'm filming everything. Kind of a love-hate relationship there. Um, I'm kind of on not a tangent, but I've been on a theme of sport-specific training this week. We did a sport-specific for surfing, for lacrosse, for tackle football. We got like mountain biking, climbing. I don't think people realize how much you can apply the sport specificity in the gym, the field, the court, the pitch, and due to the fact that you're dealing with, professional athletes, can you explain to us what sport specific training is and how we apply it?
Sure. Yeah. So sport specific training to me is basically doing things that are going to directly benefit your sport or directly relate to your sport. So I think there's definitely kind of a big gray area here because we know there's so much general stuff that we need to do, but we also don't want to get too far into the field of I'm just going to do my athletic movements with some weights or something like that. Like when you see people swinging a kettlebell as like a tennis racket, like we're getting a little too specific. So there's a very fine line of making sure we have our general bases covered, but doing things that are actually going to be a little bit more beneficial to our sport. So it's our job as strength coaches to kind of fill that space of that gray area of what is enough, but also what is too much.
So, where does this sport specific training fit in? I'm personally not familiar with the volleyball season, but is it on season, off season, preseason? Is it suitable for younger athletes? Is it suitable for older athletes? Could a casual volleyball player or football flag frisbee player benefit from this type of curriculum as well?
Yeah, so I like to program in kind of a more traditional sense of like general to specific, right? So off season is very general. I have an off season boys high school player right now where we basically do sleds and weighted carries, and like that's the majority of his program. We do sled pushes, sled pulls, sandbag carries, overhead carries, farmers walks, and as we get closer to season, we will get more and more specific. So then we'll start squatting and deadlifting, and then by the time we're closer to the season, maybe we're doing an athletic squat or like a half squat, more things that are in sport specific positions but right now we're very general. I think anybody can put that stuff into application, but it's important to have that general aspect down first. So if you can't even squat a barbell, there's no reason to do something, like a weighted plyometric, right? So we have to have that foundation set in the structure, which is what I'm building with him, for example, and then we can just build upon that structure as we go.
I think Instagram, Facebook, YouTube are largely responsible for getting people to do very, very complex things before they can even squat. So you see some like fancy guy doing like a landmine rotational clean and jerk or whatever, whatever the hell it is. And it's like, bro, do you even know how to pick up away from the floor without bending your spine? And they're like, you mean like deadlifting? That hurts my back. I can't do that. I get that way too much. So it's really like the way you said it. I'm gonna push something heavy. I'm gonna pull something heavy, and what's the third one? Carry something heavy. You're covered. You're covered at least for the off season, and even on season. The holy grail. Let's maintain my athleticism and strength in the on season. You can maintain your strength very nicely, keeping with the simple stuff. It's possible if you want to peak and like make the superstar athlete because it's going to the Olympics, you can get that 10 to 20% extra by doing all the sport specific stuff. But I really wish, especially with youth, that training was much simpler. So totally on your page. Love what you're doing.
Yeah, I think the time to be the most specific wouldn't even necessarily be in season, but like directly preseason.
Mm.
That's when you're like really training to like go hard in the season. Because even when you're in season, it's so much of it is maintenance. It's like if
Mm.
we're just doing really basic stuff to try to maintain what we built in the preseason, then that might even be more important.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all just kind of dependent. That's our job, is to figure out what is the most important thing to do with these athletes at this time.
Right. Also, every sport you're in. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're in a reaction time and vertical dominance sport. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would,
So,
yeah.
so I work very much with ball sports. So we're talking flag football, soccer, or football as Europe would call it, tackle football, rugby, and these all require significant more change of direction and speed, which basically adds more layers of things that we have to be prepared for when we get to the season. So you also said you were a CrossFit coach, and I remember back when I was learning how to weightlift, like years ago, my Ukrainian weightlifting coach, of course, was saying CrossFit is the easiest thing to program because it's all strength and power. In fact, just make them good at weightlifting, teach them how to swim, maybe teach them how to run, and they'll be damn good at it. All of a sudden, you take a bowl sport where we need like speed, agility, reaction time, strength, power, vertical strength, force development, mobility, and all of a sudden, there's a lot of factors that we have to approach when we come to the season. So not familiar with the volleyball off season, but we'd love to hear from you if you want to give us your insider programming secrets, how do you split it like, off season, preseason, on season when it comes to the sport specific elements?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll use like my college team that I work for as an example. So right now we are in the off season. The summer is the off season for them. So we're really focused on building that foundation, squatting, pressing, like trying to put on weight for them. Most volleyball players can benefit from adding some muscle. So we've got 3 days a week of full body programming right now. But then I also have 3 days a week of like the sport specific athletic stuff. So one day is like jump technique, plyometrics. One day is change of direction, agility work, speed work. And then one day is like pure plyometrics, like max effort jumping. And I'm starting with a little bit lower volume on that stuff. And then as we get closer and closer to preseason, we need to prepare their bodies, really their ankles and their knees and their back for all of the demands of volleyball. So we'll increase the jump volume as we get farther through the season. So that way, when they get to the court, because in the off season, volleyball players, like in the summer, won't typically play a ton of indoor volleyball. They'll play like more beach volleyball and more grass volleyball. And so maybe they're not getting that impact that they typically do from indoor volleyball. So we need to kind of prepare their bodies so that when they get back onto the court for preseason, they're not just like in shock from all of the impact they're receiving. And then so when we get to the preseason, we start with lower volleyball volume. The US has all kinds of like criteria of how often you can be with the coach and everything like that. So I will actually see them maybe more frequently than the head coach will, because they'll be in the weight room with me. And that's when we start to get a little bit more specific. Now that I actually have time with them, I will do like tempo training. We will do like French contrast training, that kind of stuff leading into preseason. And I like to do a couple cycles, like 12-week cycles of that. So 6 weeks of tempo training, a couple weeks of complex training, and then a couple weeks of French contrast, and get them like super explosive, super jumping. Repeat that like up until the season, and then we just kind of go from there.
So a lot of what I'm hearing from Greg is that, or hearing from you, is that a lot of these fancy schemes like French contrast and peaking and cluster sets, these are very, very good strategies for advanced athletes looking to peak. If you're just a regular dude in the gym or you're just playing casual, it's very, very likely that you'll benefit from just on keeping up the minimal, I don't want to call it minimalist, but keeping up the heavy strength training and power training and keep it simple. In fact, I remember when I programmed French contrast for my flag football players to peak them for the tournament, it totally overwhelmed them. Not because it wasn't good, but because they never had someone work with them trying to peak them. So they're like, oh my God, we're increasing the volume so much before the season, we're all going to tear our hamstrings. I said, guys, you forgot about the intent behind the programming. It's not about squatting ass to grass 100 kilo anymore. It's about maintaining that and power, power, power. So it's really on coaches to explain the intent and purpose behind the exercise. Another important aspect you said, which I very, very rarely seen coaches program in, is terrain and texture. And it's so applicable to you because you're taking people who all season are playing on softer surfaces like sand or grass or in the park or just chill, and all of a sudden moving to a hard tarmac or indoor court, which is significantly harder. And as you know, my Instagram is the Barefoot Athlete, so I spend a lot of time like diving into rate of force development, understanding how we can apply force into the ground. But we have to understand that when it comes to, and of course, stop me if you disagree with me. When it comes to the ground, for an athlete, the ground is our best friend. We want to put as much force as we could into the ground, not to smash our feet into the ground, but have the ability to rebound off of it. Volleyball players and basketball players would call this a bounce, or just pushing off the floor. When it comes to softer surfaces, because the ground is softer, we're then not able to apply as much force in, which is good for our joints, but bad for our athletic development ability. So anyone out there who deals with anything that involves terrain, like even like trail runners have to train slightly differently than runners who are just gonna run on the plain grass or the plain sand or just a simple turf or terrain.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about that because I have so many people on my Instagram who do both. They're like, well, can I train in sand to try and get my vertical up for indoor? And it's like kind of a yes, but kind of a no. So when you're training in sand, because there is a lot less impact and ground reaction time and ground reaction force, it's training more of the tissue, like the muscle, where when you are training more of on the hard court, it's more of like the ligament and tendon because you're getting that impact, right? So like it can help develop certain areas, but like training for speed in sand is not going to help you run faster on hard court because the ground contact time, especially like change of direction, is so long that it's really not going to translate. Like, yeah, your calves will blow up and like your feet can get strong and your ankles can get strong, but you still need to do training on your surface to get, again, general to specifically to your sport. There can be some carryover, but it's not going to be like, oh, I'm an indoor player, my calves are really burning when I'm playing in sand, so now I'm going to be jumping way higher. That's really generally not how it works.
Well, also remembering that because we spoke about terrain and texture, remembering that sport-specific training is not just strength, power, agility, speed, change direction, reaction time. It's what weather are you playing in? So like Greg here is playing in like freaking, I don't even 90 degrees. I certainly hope that he's playing in that temperatures in his preseason, in his off season. He's sitting in saunas, doing things that get him used to sweating. And maybe that sauna is not the best example. It's more passive, but getting used to exerting yourself, do some mobility in the sauna, getting used to exerting yourself under the heat. If you're flying, so like there's also the whole altitude, which is a little bit more rare. Actually, it's not true. You're in America. You have states like Colorado, and then you have New York. It's not rare at all. But like when we fly to Europe, the elevation is different, and athletes have to adjust to that. The weather's different. The sleep, the jet lag. There's so many factors that have to be periodized and programmed into sport-specific training. Another element you said about sand. So I think we've all been influenced by you seeing these like NFL players doing like really fancy change direction work on the sand. So it's cool. It may go viral on Instagram. Don't listen to Instagram. In fact, don't listen to. No, I'm just kidding. Unfortunately, many trainers, educators, and performance coaches out there, and this is the flow of the modern industry. You can no longer make a 5-minute education video explaining how to absorb force and how to produce force. Everything has to be, did you guys know that if you do this, and it's like, what if I want to get my point across in more than 17 seconds? So that's been a struggle I've been dealing with. I'm sure you could relate. But like the gimmicky stuff don't inherently work. And if my athletes are going to play like, casual frisbee or football on the beach on a Saturday, hell yeah, please stay active on the weekend. Please keep on moving. But I don't consider sand ideal terrain to train in. And if I want to like really train my ankles and ligaments, I'll do other much more biggest bang for my buck stuff. So like there's so much. First of all, training barefoot in general is a great way, if your body's ready for it, is a great way to help prep your lower body and ankles and ligaments and tendons for the various rigors of sport. But speaking about biggest bang for your buck, what would you say is the most dominant athletic attribute needed in volleyball?
I would say it's probably power production, and somewhere between power production and like elasticity. So, and it depends on what type of volleyball. So when we look at beach volleyball, I would say more towards power production because the ground contact time is longer and the surface is softer. You'll notice that the jumping that they do is more a power production type of jump where it's a little bit more knee and hip angle, a little bit less speed into the approach because you're jumping off the soft surface. When you get to indoor volleyball, the level of power and the level of elasticity needed kind of changes. So it's a lot more bouncy. It's a lot more speed oriented. That's why you see so many guys and girls who are very thin and very lean, but they jump super high and they hit the ball super hard. I never understood that when I was in high school. I'm like, why are these skinny guys hitting the ball so much harder than me when I work out all the time? Because I didn't understand these elastic components. So that would be things like sprinting and sprinting drills, bounding, pogo hops, things like that are going to develop your elasticity. Even like tempo work, eccentric work to train the tendons is going to develop that bounciness, which is not the same as power production, to make you a little bit more explosive off the ground. And, there's certain times like middle blockers, they need to be very quick on their jump. So you don't have time to take this big up and down. You just have to boom, pop up. So I would say for beach volleyball, very important for power production. And then also conditioning is kind of a really big important factor there. But then indoor volleyball, we get more power production is still huge, but elasticity becomes even more important.
I really, really like how you defined it. I think in the amateur athlete world, people get really confused between power exercise and elasticity, and I'll just define it for the viewers out there who don't quite understand about the science jargon we're going on. So power is basically the ability to move your body quickly. So if I can't squat 10 kilo, you probably shouldn't be focusing on power movements because strength is the base of power. Then the PTs are going to say, no, mobility and stability is the base of strength. But that's all cool because it's all true. Point is, the stronger I am, the more potential I have to produce force. So if I take a power lifter, and I've done this, and put him in the football field, he's going to suck. He's not going to be good. He's not going to be able to get explosive. He's not going to be able to tackle well. The second I take this powerlifter strength potential and I train him in the gym and on the field to be powerful and do squats quickly and do bench press quickly and do these things in a little more explosive manner, that's power production. It's how fast can I move my body. Elasticity, specifically referring to the Achilles tendon, think of it like a rubber band. So if I pull this rubber band, it's going to bounce back. So as Greg was saying with these leaner athletes who are quite small, and it's like they're not strong. Well, how come they're so what we think is powerful? The reality is they've trained their body to be very bouncy, so to speak. So their Achilles tendon and their leg and everything involved in the ankle region just has a very, very good ability to bounce. And sand will be harder to utilize that. In harder surfaces, you'll see crazy bounces. Yeah, that's about it. I think I summed it up.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It's definitely, and it's one of those things when you think about it, like as you go up the leg, you go less elastic and more power. So like foot and ankle, calf, super elastic, not a lot of power. Knee, you can still get a lot of elasticity out of like your patellar tendon and your quad tendon. But then when you get up to the hip, it's like all power production. Really short tendons, really big muscles. Where down in the foot and ankle, it's really long tendons, a little bit shorter muscles.
It's actually funny. It's actually funny you say that because I'm working right now with a few of my lacrosse girls are in the States, and I'm peaking them for the World Games and the World Championships. And one of my girls, so I put her on her peaking program, and there was a miscommunication, and she was like still doing the eccentric stuff. Like it was like a concentric base squat, but she didn't fully understand the video tutorial. And I saw it on her Instagram. I'm like, hey, hold up, let's give you the intent behind this exercise. And all of her movements, she was doing, let's say, like a dumbbell jump instead of like a pogo hop, which is what I wanted her doing. She was doing like a dumbbell jump with like a stick and hanging out at the bottom, which is not bad. In fact, in the off season, I might do that, but in the on season, I want that elasticity. I know she's strong. I know she's powerful. I'm trying to peak her. So think of like a dumbbell jump. So I can jump with a dumbbell and then land and absorb the force, and I'm producing power output. I'm going from 0 to 100. Then I can rapidly bound off the floor with minimal knee movement and really let my calves do the work, and that's a little more elastic training. When we say, I think you could correct me, but when we say vertical jump training, because that's like every b-ball, basketball, or volleyball player dream, I think it's a fine balance between power and elasticity. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and I actually put a post up that I think we as strength coaches need to do a better job of what we're talking about when we say do XYZ for vertical jump, because there's a very big difference between like a standing like counter movement jump, a 2-foot jump, and a 1-foot jump. And that basically changes. Yeah, it changes the spectrum of power to elasticity, where a standing vertical jump is there's almost no elasticity, very power based. 2-foot jumping is more like in the spectrum of, depending on the athlete, power and elastic. And then 1-foot jumping is very elastic. You're just getting speed and you're popping off of that one leg, very small knee bend. So I think we need to do a better job of being more specific, because if we're saying do this exercise to jump higher and we're doing a seated box jump, but somebody wants to jump higher off of one leg, that's not going to have as much benefit for them as something that'll be a little bit more specific. I think everyone should do everything. This is something that I got from Knees Over Toes guy, which is, I think, is huge. It's a game changer for me personally, which is learning how to jump on all 4 plants. So as a volleyball player, I'm left-handed. Every time I jump is a left-right plant. And I almost never do a right-left plant. And I rarely ever jump on one leg. So I think that is a large athletic training. So I have all of my clients jump right, left, left, right, off of their right foot and off of their left foot, to try to really not only balance out the athleticism, but the forces that go into your body and your legs when you're jumping off of 2 feet, because that is just an overuse thing that over time can result in some chronic injuries.
I really love that. I mean, that kind of addresses the whole unilateral versus bilateral training structure. And there's guys like Michael Boyle who are still saying, don't do squats, just do lunges and just do single leg RDLs. But you have to realize that if I'm bursting out of my linebacker position on 2 legs, and you're bursting out of your volleyball serve on 2 legs, you need to develop that bilateral strength. In fact, as I said, the more bilateral strength I have, the more force potential I have. But if I never train myself on single leg, or I never train my less strong side, it's possible that I can get away with it for a number of years. But all it's going to take is suddenly like, hey, Paul is out. Could you go switch to the art position, please? I'm just like making up a scenario. And all of a sudden he has to jump up his other leg and he tears his ACL and he's like, I just trained for 7 years of my life and I never got hurt. And that's because his right leg is completely conditioned for jumping and landing, and his left leg is not. So a way to get around that is in the gym, tons and tons of unilateral work. And if you notice a big discrepancy, which by the way is very common in any sport, because like if it's a throwing sport, they're going to be super right arm dominant. If it's a jumping or a sprinting sport, they're going to be super strong leg dominant, front leg dominant, because they're always bursting off their front leg. I like, especially in the off season, we'll do more mobility and more soft tissue work on the stronger leg to help release it. And we'll add more strength and power. We might even add an extra set to the less strong side to kind of let it catch up. And we don't have to do this forever. We can do it until A, there's no more pain. B, we can see that they're equally bursting out of both sides, or just they can match weights on both sides. Or if you want to get fancy, there's all sorts of tests you can do in like the PT clinic by here. You can test your single-legged strength. You can test your single-legged power. There's so much stuff you can do, but if you're coming to the season, you want your whole body to be ready, even for the unknown, even if you're suddenly going to jump off a leg you've never jumped off in your life. Would you say, do you have anything to add to what I said?
I do actually. One of the reasons why, because I get questioned about this, I do so much single leg jumping with volleyball players, even though we primarily jump off of one leg, is you will probably more often than not land on one leg. Just because of the way you're leaning and you're swinging and everything is kind of chaotic when you're playing, you're almost landing like a 1-2 almost every time. And if you're never practicing that in the gym, then your body is not able to handle those forces very well when you get onto the court. So when we do 1 foot jumping, that also makes us focus on 1 foot landing. That can then make us stronger and more resilient for the chaotic environment of playing volleyball.
One of my classic lines when I train people, both teams and individuals, I'm a very rhetorical teacher. So I don't just give them information. I'll be like, this exercise is an example of, and then they'll be like, triple extension, agility, reaction time. Like they like know what to say already. But I always teach, especially when it comes to youth, that before we produce force, we have to learn how to absorb force. So what Greg here is talking about is force absorption, meaning if I'm going to land 100 to 200 times, probably more in a game, I'm making up the statistics now, on my stronger leg, that's okay. And that just means my leg is going to be able to produce that. But the second I land on my less strong leg, see, individually, not in both legs, my leg's going to lag behind. And this is very, very, very common, not just in volleyball. In fact, almost every sport, the less strong leg is usually also, it doesn't have as much elasticity, but it also doesn't have as much ability to absorb, to absorb force, which is why it's more common to get injured. So I really like that aspect. I think all coaches, bilateral stuff, unilateral stuff, single-legged stuff, contralateral stuff, without getting too fancy, like you have to look at the overall scheme of programming and understand how much time you have with them and logistics, but that's usually the way to go. I know I don't really want to ask this question because I know there's so much attributes that an athlete needs, but if I could give like a biggest, like a guy's gonna reach out to you on Instagram and say, hey Greg, I'm a 15-year-old, okay, that's a bad example. I'm an 18-year-old, I'm in like the college, I'm about to go into the college D1, and what's my biggest bang for the buck? What should I be working on most? What's your answer?
For volleyball players, I would usually say getting stronger. Volleyball players historically, and it's getting significantly better, just don't spend a ton of time in the weight room. So that is, and then they're going to when they go to college, right? They're going to make them. So if they can get stronger and get in the weight room before they get to college, that is going to give them the most bang for their buck because they're already jumping a ton. You know, every time they play volleyball, they may not be max jumping as much as they think they are, but they're jumping a ton. Volleyball players just love to jump. We do it when we're not even playing. You know, maybe when you're not maybe not my age, but when you're younger, right? I minimize my jumping now, right? But just getting in the weight room to get stronger and build up that tissue tolerance is definitely going to be the most important thing from the people that I talk to. Strength would be number one. Mobility is probably number two. So you can get into like the arm swing positions and stuff that you need to play.
Yeah, I mean, I think strength is going to be the biggest bang for your buck for every single sport, whether you're young, old, medium, on season, off season. Like there's only limited things you can do. I'm lucky to be in the football world. I said the NFL world, not yet. Hopefully, although the flag football team I'm training, we are going. Hopefully, if we place the Olympics in 2028, so that's going to be fun. But when we train any football or rugby player, they're like, hell yeah, let's go squat heavy. Let's go. So that's a blessing because you could take the off season and you suddenly have the ability to lift heavy, and they're totally cool with it because they've been watching the NFL and they're watching college leagues and they know what lifting is. In all sports, not just volleyball, even soccer, which is like the most dominant sport here in Israel, it's not common. And you have to come as a strength and conditioning coach and break the norm and say, no, you guys have 2 months to work now until the next preseason. It's time to get strong. And they're like, no, I do yoga with my neighbor. And then everyone's like, nah, it's just like Pilates thing. And I was like, I do some CrossFit like once a week. I'm like, guys, everyone cancel your gym memberships. Go to the weight room, not gym, you know what I mean? Cancel your subscriptions to Pilates and come please lift and get stronger. That's definitely the biggest bang for their buck. Strength has withstood the test of time. It always has been. When you were a hunter or a Spartan, the strongest guy walked away from the battlefield. I think we do live in an over-complex world where we're being told, yeah, but what about, I'm not even talking about athletes for a second, what about mobility and what about, I don't know, geez, throw something at me. What about
balance and
what about
breathing.
Balance and breath work? And what about my pelvis doesn't relate to my diaphragm because my left glute doesn't activate? Guess what? When you squat, your left glute will activate, I promise you. If it didn't activate, you wouldn't be able to squat. And I'm not bashing that world. I think that there's truth to acupuncture and Eastern medicine, Western medicine, middle medicine. There's so much things you can do to get better. But if you have like a limited time, strength training is always going to be the biggest bang for your buck. Now, as a coach who trains volleyball players, what would you say your biggest struggle is when coaching pro athletes? To differentiate the contrast between, let's say, like regular, just, plain old gym goers who just want to get the CrossFitters I used to work with.
The biggest struggle, if we're talking like high level athletes, is the balance between Yeah, getting stronger and making progress, but also addressing the injuries, because every volleyball player at that age, at that level, is going to have some kind of nagging injuries. So that becomes kind of priority number one, is to handle the injuries, and then we have to build upon that, you know, with the strength base too. So and it's the balance of like doing enough but not doing too much compared to how much like volleyball they're going to be playing, right?
Mm.
So we need to address the injuries first, which is honestly not as difficult as people think it is. And then it's just like balancing out what they really need in the weight room on top of what they're doing for volleyball, because they could be getting an absolute ton of volleyball volume. And so adding a ton of weight room volume isn't necessarily going to be a beneficial. It's sort of trimming down to find the things that are going to be the most important for them.
I really like that. I mean, volleyball volume is basically like the true sport specific training. They're jumping, they're hitting the ball, they're reacting to the ball, they're getting the player. So I want to always balance, as you said, what we have in their games, what the skills coaches are doing with them, and what I can do with them as their strength coach. And it all boils down usually, instead of them spending, this is my opinion, instead of spending like months in rehab trying to like position their joints, strength train. It goes back down to it. Like strength training is the best prehab, and many times it's the best rehab. If there's underlying injuries, we're gonna have to go back and do some rehab stuff, mobility stuff, but it's all gonna tie into the weight room. And if athletes realized the importance of the strength coach more, they'd likely be spending the most time with you, more than the physical therapist, more than the skills coach, because these guys have been playing volleyball since they were 8 years old. So like they know the game, they can always get better, and they're always gonna scrimmage, they're always gonna practice game. But if they wanna like improve at the age of 21 or 25, if they get stronger and more athletic and add that on top to their ball skill arsenal, they will get better. That's like the secret. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always going to be something that you can keep building on kind of forever.
Right.
Like, especially for volleyball, it's really hard to be too strong or strong enough. I think I might be at that point with some things, like if I can box squat 500 pounds for reps, like is box squatting 520 for reps really going to do that much for my vertical? Probably not. It might be doing more harm than good, but most people do not have that issue that they need to worry about. It's like, just keep getting stronger, keep getting stronger. Yeah, make sure you have that strong foundation. There's certain, like maybe if there's certain numbers you want to hit kind of as a maximum, you know, like a double body weight squat is like a pretty common example, right? I think that's standard. The strongest a volleyball player probably needs to be.
Probably for male. I assume males, correct?
Yeah. So like double body weight for males, maybe 1.5 for females. Like that's probably for a volleyball, for a non-contact sport, that's probably the strongest you need to be able to propel yourself into the air, right? So I mean, after that, it's go ahead.
No, you're good. I'm listening. I'm like absorbing and listening to the wisdom.
I was gonna, like, you know, after that, is it doing more harm than good, or am I now spending so much time focused on getting even stronger that I'm missing other qualities? Like for me, my elasticity is not very good. I'm a very power-based jumper. So is doing more box squatting going to be the best thing, or is doing more bounding and pogos going to be the best thing? You know, so I really need to balance that out. But again, the majority of people do not have that problem, right? It's important to assess, like, how's your power to elasticity, like we keep saying, but for most people, like, they can just continue to get stronger and stronger, and it will pay off on the field or the court.
This is the 10 to 20% of people. I think most people still can benefit from strength. The best way I heard it summed up was, once again, back to that Ukrainian weightlifting coach. A guy came into the weightlifting course with like a 300 kilo back squat, and the weightlifting coach is like, "You're not going to be squatting for the next 3 months. We're working on your power up, but we're teaching you how to clean and snatch as heavy as you could." And he couldn't even snatch 20 kilo. Okay, I'm exaggerating. Because he could bicep curl the barbell and press it over his head. But the second he came to technique or power, he just couldn't connect the dots. So like, if someone's that strong, if you hit your strength standard, it's okay if you continue getting stronger. But do you want to turn your volleyball team into a bunch of powerlifters, or do you want to turn your volleyball team into a bunch of athletes? So by taking that allocated time that you have, the 2, 3, 4, 7, ideally times a week, to work with them, and you can apply it to other things, it will be much more applicable.
Yeah, it's like you have that strength, but then it's like, okay, now what do you do with that? Right? You have to do something with that strength, and because we're not power lifters, we need to, you know, be able to apply that to the sport. That's why I like For upper body, I really like body weight training for volleyball players because we're not really doing anything upper body wise against an outside load, obviously like contacting a ball, but we have to be able to move our own body really well and have the flexibility and mobility and the strength to move our own body. That I really love a lot of calisthenics and things like that for volleyball players because it teaches you the connectedness to your own body and your ability to move it.
I like it. I think I would call that aspect what we call body awareness. And if you get stuck, like obviously bench pressing or like using a jammer is super important for rugby and football and tackle football players, but a volleyball player has to not get too stuck in the I must lie down and pull my shoulder blades back while squeezing my core bench press position. He has to be like very, maybe flowy is the right word, but more like mobile and strong, fluid. There you go. Forgetting my English after spending too many years in Israel, but very fluid and understand how to reach his strength and mobility potential and end ranges of motion against a little bit of force, which is the volleyball at high velocities. And as you said, like I love it, pull-ups, dips, even handstands. These are things that you're forced to be aligned and be body aware and brace correctly. Whereas the bench press, you can get away because you're lying down on a bench. So like, I'm all for the bench press. I've competed in bench pressing. I have my lifters bench. I have my contact sports guys benching. But maybe there's other push dominant exercises that are not lying down because the only sports I know not lying down are none. I mean, maybe Paralympics, but like even the only seated sports are like cycling and rowing maybe or wheelchair games. But if most of your exercise are done sitting down, like seated shoulder press, all these things, you're getting strong, but are you teaching your body how to connect the dots together to be fluid in the game?
Exactly. I would say one of my favorite non-body weight exercises for volleyball players would be like a landmine press, landmine overhead press, because it's a whole body movement that now your shoulder is not impinged. You get the protraction and retraction. And also if you have a shoulder injury, because you're not getting necessarily all the way overhead, it's very safe for the shoulders for volleyball players with the impingements and things like that.
I very much love the landmine. I think it's a very versatile tool along with the hex bar for athletes because it kind of defies the laws of physics. So like when an athlete walks into my gym, I explain to him about concentric and eccentric loading. So when he's like going on the pull-up bar and dropping down, he understands that not just like, oh, go slowly as you go down in the pull-up, but I actually explained to him that when you drop down quickly, which it has its advantages in the on season, you're actually gravity is getting the rep. Your muscles are not getting the rep. So then, as a trick question, this was like yesterday with two new football players. I said, all right, going to the gym, what system here defies the laws of gravity? And they're like, I don't know, the bench press? No, that's a barbell. That's gravity. And then they're like, oh, the bands. And I said, that's right, because the band's force is now in whatever manner you do it. And I said, what else? And they pointed to the cables. The cables are wherever the force is. So a landmine is the same thing. The force is now not only at a sport-specific angle, which is great for throwing, pressing, hitting, pushing, but it's also, as you said, it really allows you to float the scapula up. Now, I don't know if it was you. Did you post like a landmine overhead videos recently?
I may have, yeah. It was maybe a couple weeks ago, but yeah.
So I don't know if it was you, but I very much resonated with while like a barbell, you're kind of like stuck unless you have amazing overhead, then you can like really get the scapula involved. The landmine really allows you to float the scapula up, which is exactly how you're going to throw. When you throw and hit, your body's not going to throw or hit in an isolated manner. The scapula is going to get involved. So landmine, super versatile tool. What other tips or tricks or hacks or issues that you want to bring up to all the fan base? Are a bunch of athletes in different sports, a bunch of coaches in different sports that you want to lend your wisdom to?
I would say, and this should probably resonate with your fan base, is strengthen your feet and make sure you are doing things barefoot because that is our, I'm sure you talk about this all the time, our one point of contact with the ground, right? So if we are, because I know at least in America, especially basketball is probably the worst, feet just jammed into the shoes. And I try to like look at their feet. They're terrible. Like, and a lot of volleyball players wear basketball shoes. So yeah, it can be the exact same thing. You've got to take care of your feet and your ankles because that is how you put force into the ground. So it doesn't matter. I say this all the time. It doesn't matter how strong your glutes and your quads and your hamstrings are. You know, say you can produce 100 newtons of force with your thighs, but your feet and your ankles can only get 50 newtons of force into the ground. you're only putting 50 newtons of force down. It doesn't matter that you can produce 100. So we need to really spend a lot of time and strengthen and toughen up and keep that tissue healthy so we can actually express the amount of force that we want to.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. So far, I think we're 56 out of 56 of mentioning strong feet on our podcast. That's kind of the theme. But even the barefoot athlete is going to tell you that it's not just about the feet. In fact, if people take it too much, it's like saying to that same volleyball player, let me just do yoga and hope I get better at volleyball. But it's a very big neglected part. Meaning, I think we corresponded on Instagram about this, how even athletes, why the hell are you not doing weighted calf raises? You're squatting 150 kilo, you're cleaning 100 kilo, and all of a sudden when it comes to calf raises, you think like going up and down the stair for 10 reps is going to make your calves strong. The calves are so resilient. In fact, they're schlepping around my 80 kilo all day. If they can handle my 80 kilo of body weight, I really hope that they can do a calf raise in a full range of motion with a barbell with 80 kilos. So load your calves heavy, load your shins. Ben Patrick, Knees Over Toes guy's a huge fan of this. Load your shins moderately heavy because of force absorption, and strengthen your feet, strengthen your toes. You don't have to go gung ho and be a barefoot guy like me, but you do have to spend time without shoes, especially if you're playing volleyball without shoes. I hope your feet are strong, not just in sneakers where it's all cushy and the Hoka cushion is really giving you this big springiness, an artificial springiness and force absorption. And if your gym or weight room or court has rules about shoes, it's fine. Just do the warm up barefoot. Do the warm up barefoot. Go into your workout. I would, if my athlete has to wear shoes for, let's say, his indoor games, I would do my training in shoes. There is a sport specific manner. And the way I contrast that is that on the field, we're working on turf, so they're wearing cleats. So we do the warm up barefoot, do the stability work barefoot. And then if we go into like sled sprints or change of direction or agility stuff, I put on cleats because I want them to produce traction. Ideally, and there's pictures floating around the internet of, I think, what's his name? LeBron James, Michael Jordan. I don't know, his toes just like all over the other. And like if any of you come from a background of calisthenics or handstands, for a handstand, you need the ability to splay your hands properly. So if your feet are like that, you're literally limiting the ability to produce force, as you said, from your quad, from your hamstring, from your knee, from your hip. So just dedicate that extra time to the feet. You said it perfectly.
Yeah, a couple things to say on that because I've seen that floating around recently too, and I know someone was looking at sprinters and the fastest people in the world, their feet are actually really stuck together. Because I think what it is this is now 5 separate weaker things where this becomes one stronger thing, right? So if you're looking for like maximum speed, like you get a single solid thing, and that actually can allow you to run faster. But
interesting.
That's like the top of the top.
The extreme.
Yeah, for sure. But for the majority of us, like beach volleyball player, like I need to be able to. Now I have more surface area if I can get my toes out to push through sand. So it's more beneficial because I can cover more surface area than if I'm stuck in like this. One thing that I've been doing a lot lately because of my history of calf injuries is, like you mentioned, the weighted calf raises, like doing heavy full range of motion calf raises, but then also doing heavy weighted carries. And those are very small range of motion calf raises. So it's like you pair like a slant board calf raise with, maybe you can do body weight, right, added or something like that for a full range of motion. But then you can also do body weight in each hand on a farmer's carry. And that is like a very short range of motion calf raise that is also preparing your body to absorb load. So like walking puts like 1.5 times body weight on your leg every time you step, something like that. So now if I'm adding body weight on top of that, now we're starting to get into the point where I'm mimicking the forces of running and jumping without running and jumping because I have added load just through a carry. And so I've gotten some really good results with that and preparing my feet and ankle to play indoor volleyball because you can mimic those closer to those forces without actually having to jump. And it's kind of a different stimulus to sort of roundabout get you to the same result.
That's very, very, very fascinating. You're saying some really cool gemstones that I haven't really put that perspective on. First of all, regarding what you said about sprinting, that's interesting. You're basically saying if I have that one fin to push off of instead of 5 smaller points, I'll be faster. So perhaps that can be true with, a only speed dominant sport like 100-meter sprint and track, which is why, their cleats are potentially notoriously narrow. But even sports that require like change of direction and jumping and other things other than just speed, not just volleyball, but even football, I think they could benefit from having extra toe split because when you're changing direction, that one fin technique doesn't work anymore. In fact, I give the example of my dog, who's a border collie, who we're trying to teach him how to play volleyball. By the way, we're trying to teach him all the sports. So far, he surfs, plays football, plays rugby, and frisbee, but he's different from a human, and I'm fascinated by it because when humans change direction, they have to deaccelerate, slow down just enough to deaccelerate and change direction. He doesn't need to because he has 4 points of contact. So he can thrust one part of his body, obviously his spine is more mobile than ours, while his other legs are doing like the other thing. And I think that can apply also when changing direction. It's not that your pinky toe is isolating itself, but if I have a smaller base to push off of, it will affect my change of direction more negatively. I'm kind of like think mirroring off your concept of the single track leg. That's my thought on that. My thought on the second thing you said, which was about carries. So I am a huge advocate of carries. I like the perspective you put on it. The reason why I like doing it is because it connects the dots in their body. Instead of them doing crunches like for core or like stuff that don't really carry over to any athleticism whatsoever, by taking a very heavy weight, whether they do it in a farmer's carry style or a suitcase carry style, or sometimes I'll have them for teach them how to create stability. I'll have them have one overhead with one on the side, or one in a clean position with one on the side, or mix and match. They're teaching their body how to align itself. And then if I want to take it, not align itself, that's a little bit of a bullshit term. They're teaching their body how to be aware of itself. And sometimes I'll even add what I call the sprinter carry. So you would call it a baby calf raise, a slow sprinter march, and then pop off the calves. So you're getting even larger range of motion. So same principle, but I really like the umbrella you put on it, how it's like a baby calf raise to go along with the slant board calf raises. Love it.
Yeah, I've been so I became a little bit obsessed with all of the lower leg work because it's been a couple years now. I tore my right calf, so my medial gastroc. I tore it playing volleyball, and I did not rehab it very well. I thought it would. I'm like, it'll be fine. Just do some calf raises and go play volleyball. And then I kept tweaking this and tweaking this and tweaking this, and so that's when I came across knees over toes guy, and so I was doing a lot of his stuff, like the full range of motion calf raises, the tib raises. And I thought, I'm like, okay, because of what I'm doing, I'm hitting these standards. Like I'm good until I tore my other one. Wait, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, I thought I was doing all of this stuff and people would say this to me. I'm like, they're like, I thought you were doing all this training. Like, how would you do it again? And I'm like, that's a really good question. And so I think one of the things that I was missing out is things like those weighted carries, because when I was rehabbing my first one, was during lockdown. So I was doing a lot of carries and a lot of sleds where I was getting all of that heavy load in those very particular structures, which I stopped doing when I was doing the ATG stuff. And so now re-implementing that, like I had to rethink. I'm like, I thought I was doing all of this stuff right. There has to be something missing. So if we can combine tibialis work with long range calf work, with short range calf work, with athletic stuff, I think that's a better all around kind of thing. So and even for the weightlifters out there, the stuff that I used to do was through a guy named Julian Pinot, who runs Strong Fit, which is they do some fantastic work. He has these structure goals that he comes up with. So for example, you should be able to farmers carry your deadlift. You should be able to sandbag carry, like a bear hug sandbag carry, half of your deadlift. You should be able to overhead yoke walk your max snatch, or ideally your max jerk. And you should be able to back squat yoke 1.5 times. You should be able to carry 1.5 times your back squat. So I was working up to those standards, and that's when I fixed my first calf. So realizing like I should probably get back to a lot of those type of standards has made a big difference.
Dude, I mean, you're a not just a superior level of athlete. You're working with coaches, but your body awareness is there. My body awareness is there. When I get injured, it's a huge learning experience for me, and I learned so much stuff that I'm able to apply to my athletes after, and you as well. People who don't have that awareness don't have that. Like, they're not going to be able to connect the dots, and it's usually on us as coaches to teach them that stuff. What you said about the whole carries and sleds, if you think about it, sled work is essentially explosive calf work as well. Like, when you're in that good leaning angle, acceleration training, you're getting explosive calf training. And when people ask me, like, this is pretty rare, but like, because people in my world are more focused on performance, but like, how do I grow my calves? I usually say sprint, like walk with heavy stuff and sprint with sleds. Like, your calves are getting fast and explosive, not just big. I've seen a huge actual hypertrophy in my calves from like all this barefoot stuff I've been doing because my feet are now much more stronger and resilient. I also started adding, usually in my warm up, sometimes at the end, isometric calf walks, weighted actually, isometric shin walks. Like if I have that extra 10 minutes, I'll either add carries or add some isos in just to really get the calf used to being in that full range of motion. I've also torn my calf last year. It was a minor tear, black and blue. I was sprinting. I wasn't even playing volleyball, and this pop, and I was like limping for a day. And I'm like, hold up, what's going on here? You're Mr. Barefoot. You're not allowed to tear your calf. And I realized, like, similar concept to you, I wasn't having X, Y, and Z in my work, and that really helped. Anyways, we're approaching nearly an hour. And if you want to give any last tips or sum up anything, and please tell us where we can find you on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, your website, what you offer to the world, and how we can get access to your programs and onward.
For sure. Yeah. So my primary is Instagram. It's at the Volleyball Strength Coach. There's a period between each word. I do have a Facebook page. I technically have a TikTok and a YouTube. I'm really trying to focus on the Instagram. Yeah. The YouTube will probably be the next thing that I start to do because I want to start doing more stuff like this. You had mentioned this early, like the long form content doesn't work on Instagram anymore. Like if I put out an IGTV video, it's going to get 20 views. If I put out a 7-second reel, it's going to get 100,000 views. So it's ridiculous. But so YouTube is going to be coming next, but Instagram is my primary. I post every day, if not 5 days a week. And then my website is vb-sc.com. That's where you can sign up for my online program. But I also offer one-on-one online coaching, which is kind of what I do with what I really try to focus on, where I do custom programming, custom coaching with volleyball players. But then I also have a pre-built program called Volleyball Ability that is where everyone just follows and does the same thing. It's a year-long program, periodized off-season, preseason, in-season, to get volleyball players all the way through the year.
So the custom program is more like almost one-on-one training, but on an online format. And the generic program is more like one-time cost. Here's the program, use it. I'm sure you could contact me if needed, but I'm not going to be there to like baby step you through it, kind of thing.
So actually, it is the online training is I'm writing you a custom program. We have a little bit more touching base, and then you send me your form video so I can critique them. The Volleyball Ability program it's a recurring. It's $39 a month. It's a low price program. And I still do the form coaching on that, and I still do I give a little bit of feedback and stuff, but it's just like walks you all the way through. There are 5 different phases. Each one has 2 or 3 sub phases. You do the isometric, you do the tempo work, we do the French contrast stuff later in the program. It's got that was my main focus for a while until I realized from a business perspective I could get better results from people and for myself from the one-on-one coaching. So I'm focusing primarily on that now.
Got it. Well, anyways, thanks so much for coming along, even though we've never really met, and I'm probably just some random dude who like reached out. And speaking about gratitude, I'm super grateful for you coming on the episode. Even though my relationship with Instagram is like kind of love-hate, I'm grateful that it allowed me to connect to human beings such as yourself. I love your philosophy. I align with your philosophy. Other than the fact that you wear sneakers in most of your... I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's it, man. Thanks so much for coming in, and I'm looking forward to see your continued content and the start of your YouTube channel. Looking forward.
Of course, yeah. I appreciate you having me on, and we'll talk again soon.